Hello and welcome back to the We All Follow the Forest podcast. This time for episode 6, and it's coming off the back of a result that I don't think we expected, but maybe deep down we all thought could happen, and unfortunately it did. It was a draw with Luton, and Luton, of course, getting two pretty good goals towards the end. Well, I say pretty good. We made them look like good goals towards the end. But it was a disappointing way to end a pretty good attacking game, I would say, from a Forest fan perspective. But here to discuss it with me today is Ellie Mollison. So Ellie, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I was going to say good. Minus the result, I'm okay.
That's good. I mean, it's been a tough one to take, I think. But I would like to say that coming from the Door on Tour stream that we did at the weekend, I'm a lot more relaxed now. I think that whole time it was like veins bulging out the head kind of moment, like, oh, I'm so angry about this result, because it's just kind of like I don't really know where you go from there. But at that moment in time, I was kind of like, where do we go from here? Because we want to be beating that these kind of teams are moving forward. So let's start with the things that didn't particularly go well then. Where would you like to address first, Ellie?
Probably the first goal. Not that I really would like to address it at all, to be honest. But that was looking at the time, I didn't really notice how bad it was because it was just sort of all emotions and no, don't go in, goes in. You know how it is, the adrenaline it gets you. And watching it back, it's I can only laugh. It just, obviously, I don't actually find it funny. I would much rather that we didn't concede that goal at all. But the way that someone pointed out on Twitter, and it did make me chuckle, Aurier could have literally stood still and that goal would not have happened. If he'd have just done nothing, that goal would not have happened. But I assume he slipped. It looks strange. It doesn't really look like a slip, but one can only assume that he slipped. All the floods and that, fair enough. I'm sure the pitch was probably a bit, but he slipped, managed to duck out the way of the ball. In the process, there's like a little froggy jump to try and recover, which was also really quite funny, but at least he tried. And then who was it? It wasn't, not Worrell. It came off was it Toffolo? It came off a bit dodgy.
I think so. I can't remember now.
And yeah, unfortunately, there's the goal. Yeah, it's not what you wanted. It was fluky from them. They got lucky. They got lucky that Aurier stacked it. I mean, I'll give credit where it's due. I'm not discrediting Luton at all. They came back after being 2-0 down in the 82nd minute. I can only, respect that. But if we're honest, that first goal was a bit fluky. Aurier's fallen over, which is good for them. Not great from Aurier, but it happens. It's come off a bit dodgy off of Toffolo, landed in their favour. Worrell's not quite been able to do anything about it. I think people are quite harsh on him for that, but there was a lot of chaos at that point, to be fair. It wasn't really landing for anyone except Luton. And unfortunately, there was a goal. I don't really know what more can be said other than Aurier just change your boots.
I mean, yeah, he was struggling, I think, the whole game. I think the whole game, there was one where Morgan Gibbs-White laid one off to him, I think it was, and he was coming in for the cross and he just completely fumbled it and slipped. And I feel that would have been a goal from that lead up as well. But, I think overall, attacking-wise, we did really well for the most part. Credit to Chris Wood. He was brilliant, got 2 goals. And I've said it since he came here. And I actually said it, I remember, on the radio when it was at the weekend. And the co-commentator said to me, so is that £15 million well spent? And I said, it's still the worst deal that Forest have done in their transfer history, paying £15 million. And it's not because it's Chris Wood, by the way. This is £15 million for a player that's going to be there for 1 year, and he's on a £80,000 a week contract. It's like, financially speaking, it's an awful deal. That's not Chris Wood's fault. But of course, I was more worried about what he actually offers us goal scoring wise. That's what I'm more concerned about. The money's just another thing. But, he's proven that if you play the way that he likes to play and the way that you playing to his strengths, he can get you goals. He nearly got a hat trick, and it's, and anyone can say whatever they want. It's just Luton or anything like that. But he's the player that we had available. He's the guy that made the goals happen. And, you've got to give credit to him for that. But of course, we conceded too. And that really makes me feel rubbish because after all the hard work that he put in and everyone else put in, it kind of got overshadowed by that. And that second goal was really, really devastating. There's three players that a lot of fans have mentioned, and that's Matt Turner, who I'm not too sure if I can really say much about it. I mean, it's near post. I understand that. But I think it's the two defenders that really should have got it right for me. The long ball comes in. Adebayo takes it on his chest. Worrell's on Adebayo. So Olarena should naturally be making the run behind Joe Worrell to stop any further advance. That should be the number one thing. So for me, that second goal, Olarena's got to do better. But also, and I don't know how you feel about it, but Joe Worrell getting shoved off quite as easily as he did. And I know it happens in football, but it was a little bit frustrating for me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, naturally, a second goal when you're 2-0 up to start with, that's devastating. And I think that's why everyone's judging it very harshly. It wasn't a good second goal for us, but it also wasn't that poor. No, it was poorly defended, don't get me wrong. But it's not the worst mistake we've seen from Forest. That's not a lie here. We've certainly seen worse this season, that game, let alone ever. And people making out it was the worst thing they've ever seen. I think getting out-strengthed by a player like Adebayo, credit where credit's due. That man is a monster. He's huge. It's not like Joe Worrell went and did something absolutely pathetically stupid. Don't get me wrong, I was frustrated and annoyed. Like, oh no, Worrell. Like, he's a big boy too, but it wasn't the most embarrassing thing for him. But unfortunately, fans have jumped on the fact that it's Joe Worrell and gone absolutely mad as if he's made the biggest mistake in the world. Credit where credit's due. That man is a monster. You've got to sometimes say, okay, well, he's, we know that he's good at that. We know that he's physical. We know that's what he does. He's going to beat the players sometimes with his physicality. It doesn't mean it just happens. It doesn't make it okay. Don't get me wrong. And we expect more from Joe Worrell, but it's not like the biggest mistake he's ever made. It's not the biggest mistake other players have made either. It was just, he got out-strengthed. You've got to give credit to a good player.
And I think as well, when it comes to bringing on centre-backs, I mean, you've changed near enough the entire back four. So you took off Bolly, you took off Aurier, you've taken off, other players as well. You're changing that back four so much. And, I think we made too many changes all at once. I said it on the stream I did, as I was saying earlier, with Dor. I said we took Dominguez off, which was a big, big problem because he was a leader and he was everywhere. Everything went through him. Mangala was brilliant also, and Sangare did his part as well. But, I think that we made too many changes all at once. And to an extent, I can understand why, because you want to give some players that aren't going to get a lot of game time. You want to give them a chance to have a run out. But one substitution I was really confused about, and it doesn't actually sit that right with me, and it actually really frustrated me. And which is not something I've actually said a lot during Cooper's time at Forest, because I think that he's got a lot of things right. But for me, he got this wrong. I thought that when he brought on Kouyaté, and I want to know your opinion on this, because as I say, I really like Kouyaté and what he's done in the past. And I think in the dressing room, he seems to be a character. On the training ground, seems like a really nice guy. And, he's someone that I remember seeing him after us beating Arsenal, and he was, FaceTiming his family, and it was the most wholesome thing ever. Lovely human being. But for the life of me, I can't understand what he offers Forest anymore. I can't see it. And that it sounds really extreme, and I don't want it to come across that way. But Kouyaté doesn't do anything. It hasn't done anything for me since he had that injury, the first hamstring injury that he had. The mistake at Brighton in the wall, which is, set pieces wise unforgivable. to allow the Brentford free kick. And then when he comes onto the field against Luton, he didn't do anything, but he made mistakes. And I can excuse mistakes, and but I want people to try. And for me, it just doesn't look like he doesn't offer a lot. And for me, it confuses me as to why Andrew Santos isn't getting a look in if that is the benchmark, because I can't see what Andrew Santos could have done worse in that game than what Kouyaté did. But that's an honest opinion, and that's my honest opinion, because I don't want to lay into Kouyaté, because before his first injury, he was one of my favourite players there, because I thought his work ethic was excellent and I think he was brilliant. But I just think he struggled to catch on after that injury. So what do you think? Do you think that maybe Andrew Santos should look at getting some game time over someone like Kouyaté, or maybe am I being a bit too harsh?
I think for this particular game, right, you'll have to bear with me. You have to let me get to the end, and otherwise it doesn't make sense. But the substitutions, like you say, too many. He took out the spine of the team that were doing well. They were 2-0 up, So the spine of the team that was doing all right, well, 2-1. But the spine was gone. But the reason for that is, I think a lot of fans need to remember injuries. We are being blasted left, right, and centre yet again by injuries. This is not me excusing it, but we need to understand Cooper's thought process to understand whether or not we agree with it. So just bear with me 2 seconds. But he's taken off Bolly because Bolly has looked to Cooper and said, I need to go. I mean, fair enough, yes. I'd rather you go off and we keep you so that we can start you so you don't injure yourself. Really, I think a player should be more fit than that, but he has just travelled however many miles back. It's excusable. It's understandable. I'm glad he came off. I hate having to see him go off, but I'd much rather keep him fit. We are not ready for another injury. We are not ready for another injury, especially Bolly. So off Bolly goes. That's a big, big hit to our back four. Massive. I have always said throughout last season, throughout the beginning of this season, it does not matter who is next to Bolly or Felipe. Bolly or Felipe, to be fair, but rip Felipe. But Bolly, they will make whoever's next to them play. And they're so classed by themselves. Obviously, I have favourites. I absolutely love Murillo. But you see my point. Bolly off the pitch, big problem. Aurier's gone off. Like you say, not had the best game. I personally wouldn't have done that, but I guess it was to protect him from injuries. That's my understanding of why that happened. So it felt like forced substitutions. I don't think Cooper wanted, and he said, didn't he, afterwards, he didn't want to sub those players off, but they were forced. And you know what? As much as it was annoying to see them go off, I'd much rather they stay fit. We did have squad depth, but they all went and got injured, so we no longer have that anymore. So as a result, what I think he did is, who was the third player to come off? No, that was it. It was just 2, wasn't it? And then the next one was 3. I think that's what it was. But then after that, I think what he was thinking, and in theory, it makes sense. It is logical. We've lost Bolly and we've lost Aurier. That's the spine. We've lost the people that are going to kick, and, we're going to end up having to be less, I don't mean to be rude, but be less confident defensively than we were before. With Bolly on the pitch, I'm happy. Changing 2 of the back 4 like that, we all know how dangerous that is anyway, let alone when it's a player like Bolly who you really trust. So I think his thinking was, let's get Yatesy and Kouyaté on to really be aggressive in midfield. Let's not forget the players Luton brought on. That Adebayo is fair play to him. He's a big man and he's very scary. But I think the thinking was, let's get some aggression. Let's get people who can break up the play, not necessarily score goals, but will be there to try and make up for the fact that we've lost that physicality at the back. That's what I think he was thinking. And Nico Williams came on. Who came off for Nico Williams? My brain. Sangare,
No.
Dominguez, Aurier, Bolly.
Sangare came off as well.
Yeah, I've just said Sangare. Someone else came off. My brain. Did Elanga come off? Was it Elanga?
I think Elanga, yeah.
It was Elanga.
Come off? I'm sure it was.
I think it was, but now I'm doubting myself because it wasn't Wood and it wasn't Must have been, yeah.
Yeah.
That was strange. I was a bit baffled by that. Williams coming on. I love Williams. I rate him. I think it was
Did
so
quite well, actually, I
unfortunate
thought.
that he got injured when he did. But I was a bit baffled by that. I'm not, to be fair, Williams didn't seem to look terrible. We just, as a whole team, looked terrible after those substitutions. That was harsh, terrible, but we did. We were struggling. There were so many changes, but Cooper's hand had been forced. And people kind of forget that, like, we do have injuries and we are very injury prone. Like you say, I think Andre Santos should get a look in. However, I think what he was thinking was, in this game, we've lost our physicality, we've lost our aggression, we've lost the backbone. Is that a game you bring on a youngster like Santos, who's so skillful on the ball? And when we're not really going to have any possession anymore, is that the right move? Maybe it would have been. After the performance we saw, it probably would have been. But I can completely understand where Cooper was coming from when he made that decision at the time. It didn't work this time, but what it does show us is we are massively lacking depth. We desperately need players to come back from injury, and we need Bolly on that pitch all the time.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I don't think there can be a back four at Forest at the moment that is worth playing if it doesn't have Bolly, Felipe, or Niakate in at least somewhere. Because you need that leader. Murillo isn't ready to play without someone next to him yet.
Yeah.
Worrell isn't ready. McKenna can't. You know, and maybe Omobamidele, whenever he gets his chance, could, you know, potentially act as a leader, but you know, he's still young himself and he's got to understand the Premier League first. But I would like to ask the question as to whether really, I know that Luton brought on good subs and Townsend and Barkley and Adebayo, but if you look at their bench compared to Forest, ours was more defensive. I understand that. But Andre Santos, for me, would have added that energy and that forward thinking. And what Cooper, I feel, should have done is continue to press higher like he did in the first half and the majority of the second half. Chris Wood pushed high, attacking players pushed high, and they didn't have, you know, a lower block kind of system in a way. Because when Kaminsky was making errors in his own box, no one was there to press him down. I'm sorry, and this is in no disrespect to Luton at all, but this is Luton. They're what, fourth bottom, I think. You know, we're not that far off.
Yeah. Let's not talk about it like that. At the end of the day,
but the point that I'm making is that when you're 2-0 up, why aren't you going for a third? Because to me, it felt like we were just sticking with the two and we were happy with that. Let's defend it. And I've never felt that way before. And, you know, usually when someone makes that suggestion about Cooper, I kind of go, look, I don't know if I agree. But that was the game where I saw it and I thought, we're 2-0 up here, guys. You've got to be going for a third. You know, and that's, again, in no disrespect to Luton, because they worked back and they knew the game plan and they knew how to hit Forest hard because they saw what we were going to do. But we created that weakness by being defensive. Why didn't we bring on energetic play? And, you know, I think Santos would have added something going forward. Why did we sit back? It hurts. It hurts a little bit.
See, I agree with you and I don't. It's because I hate sitting back and I don't want to sit back. And I think in hindsight, maybe it would have worked, but would he have got any possession? Would he have been given anything to be able to do anything with? I think there's a great player there, don't get me wrong. But I see Cooper's thinking, in the end, we may as well have just done it. But we should have been 4-0 up before we even conceded. And, you know, it happens. But it works both ways. I think Santos coming on was more risky than what Cooper did, in theory. And it didn't pay off this time. It didn't work. Everyone sort of crumbled a little bit. Everyone sort of stopped playing football altogether, including the players that were on before who were playing well. But Santos coming on, I can see why Cooper was hesitant in that position where he could see that our heads were down. He could see that we didn't have the confidence. He could see that it was a physical side. He could see that backbone was gone. It's hard because I see where you're coming from. And again, I'm like you. I don't like sitting back. I'm like forward, push forward. Like, you win by scoring goals. You don't win by sitting back. So that, you know, if you concede, you just score more than them. That's how I feel. So I'm the same as you. But in this time, in this particular moment, even I was a bit like, ooh, would I bring on Santos at this
We had
moment?
3 holding midfielders on the
Yeah.
pitch. So when someone says to me, I don't think we went defensive. We had 3 holding. We had Ryan Yates, Mangala, and Koyate on the pitch. Seriously, I mean, again, to an extent, I understand what Cooper's trying to do because, look, I would, as a manager, think very differently to how I think now as a fan. At the moment, because I'm talking completely as a fan. As a coach, I'd think differently. I just want to defend it, and I get that. But even with the subs that came on, we had a good enough team to beat Luton.
Exactly. And I think that's what it comes down to. People being quite harsh on Cooper. And yeah, we did make too many subs, but like I've pointed out, his hand was forced. And I understand where he was coming from. But like you say, Cooper brought on those players and should more than expect us, A, to not concede again, and B, maybe make a counter. We've still got Chris Wood on the pitch. We could have made a counter at some point. Nico Williams can be really creative. So he expected that of his players, and they didn't show. Harsh on Chris Wood. Chris Wood had a great game. We'll give him that. But you see what I mean? Like, you're exactly right. He made that decision, and we can understand why. It's kind of, this is one time where I'm really like, I'm not sure which one I would have preferred. But he went for that game plan, and we should be doing better. And it's not because it's Luton, but because it's Forest. We are better than that. We've seen every single player be better than that, but their heads were dropped. They were all over the place. The confidence was low. And I think the fans have a part to play in that. Doesn't excuse the fact that the individual performances weren't good. But usually, as Forest fans, we lift the players, and we just did not do that. In fact, we jumped on players who were playing bad, which obviously you do that in private. You go criticize, that's absolutely fine. But when I hear Forest fans booing, not me. Should I do Delia
Home
Smith?
atmosphere's been poor, and I think people are scared to say it. I said it after the, I said it after the, I think it was the Sheffield United win or the Burnley draw? I can't remember. And I was on with the guy from Nottingham Forest fan page, and I said to him, and I don't know maybe how he felt about it, but I said that I think the atmosphere has lacked, and it was early on, but the home atmosphere really has lacked, and I don't think it helps at all, personally.
No, of course not. We were the 12th man last season, and people are like, you can't expect, the fans to. Yes, you blooming well can. It makes a difference. Football's more about mentality than physicality. Why do you think Luton brought it back? Their fans showed up. Fair play to Luton players, fair play to Luton fans. I have nothing but respect for how they turned up that day. We didn't. Our players didn't, and our fans didn't. But harsh, players didn't. But at the end of the day, their heads dropped, and we want to show that resilience. And it's not the first time this season either. I mean, I know it's Man United away, but look what happened there. How many teams score an early? Oh, let me try and speak again. How many teams like Forest score an early goal, and instead of celebrating, you're thinking, no, it's too soon. It's too soon. There's too much time to mess it up. And because that's how we feel. And I think as fans, we've got to do better. Players know they've got to do better. We don't need to tell them. Of course they know. Joe Worrell, bless him, after that second goal, head in hands on the ground. You will never find a player with as much passion as Joe Worrell. That man I have nothing but respect for. And to see fans giving blatant, vile abuse to our own, what is this? Just no, that's not my Forest. And I'm just, I'm doing a little rant. But we do need to be better. Players and fans need to step up, be more resilient, and stick with it. Second season syndrome is real, guys. It's real. We can't just expect, because we didn't get relegated, that out of nowhere we're just going to be in Europe. Miracles don't happen every century. I know Brian Clough could do it, but he's practically God. He doesn't count. So I think we just need to stick with the game plan. We are seeing massive improvement from last season. Yes, we're fumbling it. Yes, we should have done better against Luton. Not because it's Luton, but because we are better. But they showed up. fair play to them. They did show up.
Yeah, I get that. It's frustrating, and I feel like it's the only podcast where I've actually been a little bit miserable, because I'm always very optimistic, and I don't, you know, I mean, I've had a stressful day anyway. I can't find my Levi's jeans, and I'm like, I'm losing it a little bit. I've just bought them, and I'm like, I'm trying to find them, so it's like that's also stressing me out. But on a serious, like Forest related note, that also kind of stresses me out a little bit. I think the flip side of what you said about remembering where we are second season, there's also the side of it where we have to remember that at the moment we are going to be in a relegation battle. If you look at our form, like if this form continues, there's a relegation battle. And I know what people are saying about Everton. Everton could get a points deduction. If they do, I would like to think that that's the bottom three kind of like done already, because it would be Everton. Yeah, you'd think it'd be cemented. It'd be probably, you know, Sheffield United, and Luton could drop in there. Burnley could drop in there. Bournemouth at the moment look like that, you know, they're really down in it. So I know what people are saying in regard to, you know, it's just one result and I think we're going to finish mid-table. We also should remember that we haven't got a God-given right to stay in this league, and we have to work bloody hard. It doesn't matter how much money we've spent, and the owners are going to be, well, the owner is going to be seeking results. And these next 4 games, you know, you've got Liverpool, you've got Brighton, West Ham, you know, and Aston Villa. These are going to be tough games. And if Forest do manage to get, and this, for me, I'm going to say what I think of the next 4 games. I don't think we're going to beat Liverpool. I think Aston Villa we're not going to beat either. West Ham, I'd like to see a draw. I think there's a possibility of it. And then Brighton, again, you know, a draw. But we beat them at home last season. You know, all of those sides we did get. I think it was all of those sides, wasn't it? Yeah, all of those sides we got point against at some point last season. So it's not impossible. It's not impossible. I'm only thinking of what could go wrong, but in reality, a lot could go right. And I do think that it is just, you know, it has been a bad game against Luton, but Forest's away form has actually looked far more promising. And I think that, you know, it's been a lot better, and it can't really get much worse if we're being honest.
Why has it been so good compared to last season?
Well, why has it been so good? I suppose we could have a look at that, I suppose, in a way, because the new signings have obviously been really important for that. Murillo had his, you know, I think was it his debut? I can't remember, against Crystal Palace. So it might have been his second game, I think, actually. Second game. Let's start with Murillo. He's a talent. He's a real talent. He makes the odd mistake, but he never gives up. He's really fit. He's really strong. And his passing ability is just magnificent, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, you know that player must have a lot of talent when his own team are raving about him. Was it Gibbs? It was Gibbs, right? Wasn't it? Who came out and was just so excited about Murillo. And that's exciting. He's so young. Is he 20, 21? Is he still 20?
I think so.
Oh my God, that's humbling. But that's just ridiculous. There's so much talent there, and like we mentioned earlier, he can't be a leader yet. That's not in any way disrespecting him. He's 20 years old, for God's sake. He's just, you know, well, I'd say he's just finding his feet, but it looks like he's found them. But, you know, he just needs someone beside him to lead. But he's got so much talent and class, and he's so exciting. But you know what, on that note of away form being unreasonably good by our standard, I don't know if I'm the only one to notice this, or maybe I've just like made it up in my head, but why have we looked better against the better sides? Because even if the scoreline hasn't reflected it, I feel like we have actually looked, the performance itself on the pitch has looked more promising compared to what happened at Luton, for example. Because even if we stayed 2-0 up, of course I'd be happy, but I don't actually think in those first 80 minutes that was our best game. Like, I thought we played, you know, well. Chris Wood played well, and everyone else played to their, you know, what we expect of them. But I wouldn't say that was a every player played well game. I think every player just played, which is good. And we were 2-0 up. Do you know what I mean? I think we have looked really good against the bigger sides. And maybe that is to do with the expectations of we're the underdogs.
I was just going to say, I think the pressure's just different, and I'll call it the Luton effect in a way. It's like that kind of, you know, when we go and play a top 4 side or a top 6 side, or at least this season. In the second half, we look like we've got nothing to lose and we're going to go for it and attack. The first half, we always look really shaky. But, I think the away form has been statistically already better than last year. It's in
Not
many
hard,
respects.
to be fair.
No, not hard. We've already equaled the amount of wins as last season. But at the same time, I think that the pressure, again, it's the Luton effect, because what have you got to lose in that second half? And for Luton, what have you got to lose? It's you're 2-0 down. Let's just go for it. And Rob Edwards put in a good plan. And, in fairness to Luton, they're out of that bottom three, which is remarkable to think of the little money that they've spent, the amount of frees they've brought in, and, just the general kind of way that they've gone about things is very unorthodox for most, newly promoted Premier League sides. So a lot of credit, to them. And that's not just for our game, but also just their outlook on the league as a whole. But one other big talking point as well is Matt Turner and whether he should keep his place, because he hasn't done anything particularly wrong for me, but I would like to see Vlachodimos get some game time.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't read the article, I'll admit, but I've seen the headlines going around of him allegedly getting frustrated that he's not getting game time. And I can see it. But like you say, Matt Turner's not done any wrong, I don't think. I wouldn't say done any right. Of course he has, but he hasn't done anything that I've gone, oh, what a save. Like, do you know what I mean? I wouldn't say go above and beyond and say that, but he's been pretty solid. There's not been many times I've gone, oh, he probably could have saved that. I think he saved what he should and then not been able to save what he shouldn't. And that's kind of to be expected. Is now the right time to find out is the only thing. For me, he would have to be a step up from Matt Turner for it to be worth it, because I hate saying it and I'm not using this as an excuse. It's just a fact. We're injury ridden. We've all those our top goal scorer, who was on absolute fire, Awonyi, gone. We've lost Callum Hudson-Odoi. We basically lost all our attacking options near enough. We have nothing to bring on at the moment. And we're, even at the back, as soon as we get a left backs, they get injured. It's like the cursed position. Thank God for Toff. Who would have thought we'd be saying that? And everything's a bit disjointed. There's not very often the same. Have we played the same team, to be fair? There's always changes and there's always some sort of uncertainty. Is now the time to change the keeper? Unless Matt Turner starts being subpar, for me, I would say no. Maybe it is unfair.
So when is a good time? When is a good time?
When he makes a mistake. I feel like decent.
Should you wait for him to make one?
Rewarded. Like I say, if he really is a step up from Turner, then now. But for me, it has to be a step up. It can't be even for it to be worth it, because that's another change. And that's, the keeper has a big part to play. They're not just a shot stopper. They're not just distribution. They have a big part to play. It all comes from the back, especially for teams like Forest and the teams at the lower end of the table, sorry. But if he's a step up, then absolutely put him in now. But if they're relatively even, Turner's done nothing wrong. If he does something wrong, naturally there's competition. Give him a go. What could go wrong? Well, a lot could go wrong, but still, my point, you get my point. But that's how I feel on that. I can understand his frustration, but that's football. That's football.
Yeah, it's a hard decision to make. And personally, I think it would be nice to see Vlachodimos get a chance. And maybe, looking ahead into after Christmas, maybe you could change back if there's a problem, or, I would like to see him get a chance, because I think it'd be hard to make him number 2 for the entire season and to see him not get any game time, but maybe in a cup, it just wouldn't make sense for me. But, Matt Turner, in fairness, hasn't been particularly, inconsistent. So you've got to give that to him. And looking ahead to Liverpool then, is there any major changes that you'd made in the team that started against Luton? Because I would name one for me. I wouldn't have Morgan Gibbs-White in that right wing role.
No, that was a bit strange, to be fair. No one got injured, did they, from that last game? Everyone. I hate that I have to ask this and check. Did anyone actually get? I think people came off to save them rather than injury. So I don't know if we. I'll be honest, it's not what I want to be playing. I don't mean that harshly to the players. They're great. You know, I have full faith in them. But it's not our best team. I love Ola Aina. He didn't play very well, though, when he came on. And for me, and I've always said it, you reward good performances and you, I don't like to say punish bad ones, but you don't get rewarded for a bad performance. Because Ola Aina, beginning of the season, was absolutely class. And I think everyone will agree with me. But he came on and he struggled. And I think it would be wrong to put him. Oh, but then. Sorry, I'm like arguing with myself at the minute.
So
but
right,
then again, Aurier didn't have a good game because my ideal is obviously Aina left back and then whoever's fit right back. But then Toffolo hasn't looked terrible, has he? I'm not going to lie. I do always still have a bit of a heart attack whenever it's coming on the left. Is that the right phrase? I think you know what I mean when I say that. Always get a bit stressed, but he actually hasn't looked bad. I think based on Toffolo's performances and Aina coming on and not looking very strong, I don't think it would be fair to change it. I think sub Aina on and give him a chance to actually perform before, give him some more game time. But I don't know. And then Aurier struggled, didn't he? But do we put that down to one bad game? I don't know. Would we? It's difficult. When players don't play, it's hard to judge.
Well, I've got a rogue shout for you then.
Go on, be rogue.
It's rogue. Would you consider Nico Williams in a right wing role? If it meant putting Morgan Gibbs-White more central?
Yes. I don't even think that is that rogue. Because one thing I've always said about Williams, and I say it like it's only me who said it, we've all said it about Williams, is whenever he played that right back position, he was always better as a right wing back. Everyone agreed on that. But when he played that right back role, he was always loved him going forward. He always looked so creative and he really had a lot to give, especially when it was Brendan Johnson. But I always got excited about that. And I think he could really make some great through balls. He was brilliant at that. But defensively, we all had a minor heart attack anytime there was a one-on-one, any time, to be honest. He found his form, unfortunately, just before he got injured, which, when was that? Was that at the end of last season he got injured? It was, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the Brighton game.
So unfortunate because he was playing really, really well. He'd really found his, not that he played terribly all season or anything like that, but he was playing really well. But I think based on what he's shown, that creativity, the fact that he can put balls into the box and the fact those through balls that we know that he can do, I wouldn't say it's that rogue. And right now, it's not like we have many options. So is there much to lose? Because I think Morgan Gibbs-White needs to be in the middle. I'd rather play to Gibbs-White's strengths because we know what a player he can be than try and fill other holes, if that makes sense. Because if you're constantly just focusing on filling holes and not actually letting that talent play, you're not going to get very far. You're just surviving, and that's desperation. But I wouldn't say it's that rogue. Okay, yeah, no, it is quite rogue, but I quite like it. I quite like the sound of it. And maybe I shouldn't, maybe I'm crazy, but I quite like the sound of it.
Yeah, and it, by the way, this is not something I suggested. This is something that someone mentioned on, again, Door's stream.
Just take full accountability.
Yeah, I mean, look, I thought about it, but then I kind of thought, I don't know if I want to mention it. But then someone else did, and I was like, okay, it's not an awful shout. I thought he came on and he presented himself pretty well. But it'll be interesting to see whether Cooper changes formation against Liverpool. not because of the fact that they are Liverpool, but more so because of the options we've got available. And if we haven't got that many attacking players available, I just wonder whether he'll switch to a system that's a little bit more midfield orientated with a few more, well, a midfielder extra perhaps. But I'm old school. I would take out the wings area completely and play a flat 4-4-2. But that's only because that's what I play on Football Manager. And to be honest, Football Manager logic applied to real life makes absolutely no sense. So that's not even remotely an actual thing that I would do with Forest. But you can understand why Cooper has such a headache picking the team. But that being said, I want us to go to Anfield. I want us to be brave. I want us to be positive. I want us to be, to an extent, attacking, but not too attacking to the point where Liverpool are just going to, tear us apart and play us at our own game. So, but I want us to go for it, because the only times that we've played well in games is when we go for it. We've not played well at all, bar one game this season where we've been defensive. That game was Chelsea, by the way. That's the only good defensive game we've had this season. If we just go for it and we attack, I think we'll do really well. But that was episode 6 of the We All Follow the Forest podcast with me and Ellie Mollison. Thank you for listening. I hope we covered everything without getting too Mardy or frustrated about it. More me, Mardy. But it's fine. It's cool.
Sorry.
Yeah, we all have these rants, and it's good to have, I think, a little chat about it and say your honest opinion as well, because I completely forgot we were on a podcast for most of that. So it's nice to just have that chat. It was like a Zoom call, but it's always good to have these chats and discuss where we're at. And in honesty, I don't think my projection for where Forest's finish is going to change. I said, I think I said 13th or 14th at the start of the season, and I'm sticking to it. But it's a blip in the road, and we move forward, and we'll head to Anfield, hopefully excited, and maybe come away with a point, or who knows, even 3, and I can enjoy my weekend in Newcastle straight after even more. So thank you for listening. That's episode 6 of We All Follow the Forest podcast. Please subscribe, follow, and like for more, and we'll see you very